Hi everyone. Sorry, I was just chatting away to my parents. They're leaving the caravan to go for a walk, and I was like, for God's sake, Mom and Dad, please get out of here. Like we're trying to host a webinar here for the Just Transition Greens. So hello everyone. I can see you in the chat. Hi. No, this isn't a Sinn Féin front meeting. Wrong meeting. Yeah, I also started talking when we reached exactly 69 participants. I feel like that needs to be recorded as well. We're now at 75. Oh, wow. Very good. Very good. It is very nice. We'll get started soon enough because it's a nice day outside. And yeah, we do have a schedule of events to run through here. So there will be some really excellent presentations from some of our panelists here. Yeah, this is just so exciting. I'm so excited and happy to see you all. Hello, Stony Batter, Ashtown. It's weird that I can't hear anyone else, so I'm sort of going to be a bit like your ones from Eurovision, like, hello from Donegal. Very good. Okay. Oh yes, Cork South Central, the best constituency in Ireland. I'm sure other people will disagree.
I disagree.
Yeah. So I don't know if you would know everyone here. So I'll just introduce the panel maybe as a start. So obviously we've got my co-chair, or interim co-chair, is Cllr Áine Groogan, and she is in Belfast, and she's been doing brilliant work so far. And we're really trying to you know, make sure that this is a proper all-Ireland venture, north and south. So we're very happy to have co-chair Cllr Áine Groogan here. We have Professor John Barry, who will be speaking this evening about just transition. We have Seán McCabe, who does excellent work with task and doing research, and was also telling us some fun facts about Mary Robinson's output. So perhaps might tell us a little bit more about that later, and has done great work with Just Transition. We have Neasa Hourigan TD, who needs no introduction whatsoever. Yeah, and she's been doing absolutely brilliant stuff. Yeah, and while she may disagree that Cork South Central is in fact the best constituency in Ireland, we'll agree to disagree on that. And she's also from Limerick, like myself. So that's also just some fun facts. And the Just Transition Greens account is being run by Councillor Oliver Moran this evening. So Oliver will kind of be picking things up as we go along. Oh yes, there he is. Very good. Councillor Oliver Moran is the Just Transition Greens. So we have 86 participants now, and it's coming up to 10 past. So I think what we'll do is we'll go through the programme of events. I'm just going to get this up here. I think the start anyway is introductions from myself and my interim co-chair, Councillor Áine Groogan. So Áine, do you want to come in and actually tell us a little bit about you know, what you see the Just Transition Greens and is going, and I suppose your experiences as co-chair so far?
Hi everyone. Yeah, look, I'll maybe introduce myself a little bit first. I can imagine maybe few people in the call that won't know who I am, though I do see a good northern contingent there, which I always like to see. Yeah, look, I was elected back in May 2019 for the Botanic Ward in South Belfast in Belfast. So we had a great election then, as you did in the South as well, in terms of council representation. So we went from one councillor in Belfast to four. We got three in North Down and one in Lisburn and Castlereagh Council as well. So we unprecedented success. So as a party, we grew quite a bit up here as well. I also work for one of our MLAs and the leader in the north, Cllr Áine, and have done for 3-4 years. Fun fact, I managed to, my first day working for her was the day the executive fell in Northern Ireland. No coincidence. So it's all changed for us at the moment up here as the executive is now back and running. We got about 6 weeks before COVID hit, so it's all a bit mental, to be honest. I suppose I'll probably go back to why I joined the Greens in the first place. And I'll be quite honest, it wasn't anything to do with environmentalism. It really, quite frankly, wasn't on my radar that much. I had actually lived in Dublin for 4 or 5 years, and then I lived abroad for a while. I had come back to Belfast and had always been fairly political, but I suppose not in the traditional Northern Irish sense. In terms of Northern Irish politics, as I seen it, green versus orange never really spoke to me. I'm from a Republican family. They're prominent members of another party, but it was never my politics, and I grew up pretty much rebelling against that. And for me, the big issue that I had gotten, was my political activism started with, was in terms of reproductive rights. So I had started in Dublin getting involved, and then when I moved back home, it was a massive issue for us. And honestly, there was only one party in Northern Ireland that spoke the same language I was, and that was the Green Party. And honestly, it was probably through Cllr Bailey herself as well. I'd hear her speak at a student event a couple of years prior, before she was even elected. And for the first time, it was somebody speaking my language. She wasn't a typical usual politician, and she just spoke a bit of common sense and had a bit of wit about her, and a very proud feminist. And honestly, that's what opened my eyes up to the Greens. I'm from quite a rural area, mid Ulster and South Derry, so we had a pretty homogenous kind of electorate down there. You know, it's very firm 3-seat for Sinn Féin, 1 DUP, 1 UUP. There was no real other representation. There was no real choice. So to come to Belfast, Greens were actually a viable option at that point. We had one MLA in North Down at that point, and it really was my first introduction was through Claire and her feminist politics. So it was on the social policies, it was on the economic policies. That's what attracted me to join the Green Party in Northern Ireland. And I'll be quite honest in that. I definitely wouldn't have considered myself an environmentalist at that time, but it was on the issues of social justice that I joined, in human rights, really. As I got involved more and I learned a lot more about it, it became very apparent to me how they were not different things at all. They weren't even, not just they were connected, they were literally they were one and the same. So it's justice and environmental justice. You can't really have one without the other. So yeah, that's really what my vision of the party was. Now I acknowledge that I suppose we've probably been fairly separated as a political party in terms of North and South, for a variety of reasons. It took me a while when I joined to even realise that it was an all-island party. And like I said, as someone who had lived in Dublin, really the last time the Greens were in government, my opinion probably wasn't very high of the Southern Greens. And who knows if that would have had a bearing on my decision of joining if I had realised the link at the time. So like I said, the parties have been pretty disjointed, and I don't think it's right. As I think the line Cllr Bailey uses quite often in terms of, you know, the climate crisis knows no borders. We are one island in terms of biodiversity and economic crises, and you know there's many other issues that we share the same, particularly issues such as housing, and obviously Brexit and what under God that's going to mean for us all. So it is really important for me that we maybe do start doing things a lot better and joining up a lot more. I'll speak a little bit, I suppose, of the last few months as a Northern Green. It's been pretty challenging. Have done quite a bit to try and engage our membership in the Programme for Government vote and in terms of leadership, and basically just let people really to have the discussions in terms of what it means for us up here. Obviously, we are a little bit disconnected from it in terms of, I suppose, impacts and effects on us is probably not overly apparent, but internally as a party, I think it has really shook a lot of people. I joined the Northern Greens on the basis of social justice, and I think we definitely have a large contingent of people that have joined for the same reason. So to kind of see what a lot of us thought was a Programme for Government that really didn't have those kind of left leanings was difficult for a lot of us to comprehend in terms of we are meant to be the one party. How is this something that was palatable, I guess? And there was a lot of people struggle with that. Now, I'm going to excuse any generalizations. We're not a homogenous group, and I know we had people that voted for the Programme for Government and voted different ways in the leadership election. But as a general trend, from what I've heard speaking with people, there was a lot of discontent really around the Programme for Government and what we've seen. I think sure some of you have seen one of the best lines was ever thrown at Patrick Harvey, one of the leaders of Scottish Greens, about being a watermelon. I think the full title was like a lentil eating, sandal wearing watermelon. So like we were pretty close to the Scottish Greens as well, and last time they visited they left off a load of badges, which basically is a watermelon. So they've really adopted the symbol, so red on the inside and green on the out. And I think for most Northern Irish Greens that symbolises our politics as well. So that's probably why I kind of was keen to join this as well, both in terms, I suppose, of the fact that we haven't really embraced the fact we're an all-in party up to now, the difficulties with the Programme for Government and what it means about being in government. Yeah, I think all that has probably drove us to where we are here and having to look at that, and a real sense that it needs to be a just transition. It's not about doing as we did before, but with bicycle lanes and electric vehicles, that's really not going to cut it. It does have to be, as the climate strikers say, about system change. And I really hope that the Just Transition Greens can kind of work as a vehicle to kind of try and deliver that across the island. We have our own challenges up here with an environment minister that may not recognise climate change, but it's a wider conversation. But yeah, I really do hope that we can see greater movement with this, both internally as a party and externally. Honestly, I don't really know. I don't have an answer in terms of what I hope Just Transition Greens will do. I think that's part of this today, is to have that discussion with members. But all I can do is kind of say kind of my background and why my motivation really for wanting to be here. And like I said, I think it's key that we drive it forward as an all-island movement, and really just let's see where we go from that. I'm probably waffling at this point, so
no, that's great. That's great, Anya. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much, and it's absolutely brilliant to have your perspective as well. And funny enough, reproductive rights actually brought me into the Green Party as well. Into politics in general, really. And obviously we didn't have a position for quite some time with the Southern Greens, but we did something about that. So I suppose the point at which we're at now is, I'll just run through the schedule. So 15:15, which we're 2 minutes. 2 minutes late. What is Just Transition Greens? Seán McCabe, our policy officer, is going to give a presentation. So hope you like slides. At 7:30, we'll go towards the context of green left movements. So Professor John Barry, who's one of our outreach officers, will go through that. And then at 7:45, we'll have Deputy Hourigan just giving an Oireactas perspective. So then at 8 o'clock, then there's an open discussion that will be chaired by myself and Anya. And I see that someone has already put stuff into the Q&A section. So if you want to put your questions or thoughts recurring to you during this particular presentation, just throw it into the Q&A. With regards to that open discussion, I'll say it again once we get there, but this webinar is being recorded. All of my comments about 69 and all. Yeah, if you do choose to speak, you will be recorded. So just to make you aware of that, we're going to try and keep it to 2 minutes and prioritize female speakers if possible. So right, that being the case, Seán, do you want to take it away?
Sure, thanks, Lorna. I'm not going to take all 15 minutes of my allocated time. I'm actually going to hand over to Oliver Moran towards the end, who will go through some of the feedback we've received from the survey that went out with this invite. And just to say before going any further, Oliver is an absolute driving force behind all of this. I think everyone will agree with that and deserves massive respect and credit for all he has done to date. For me, just to Áine's point about, and Lorna too, about where I came from to this, I suppose I came through climate justice into politics, and the only reason I ended up in climate justice was also because of inequality, like deep concern with inequality, whether that was internationally or indeed within our own country. And you see very quickly then how environmental issues overlap on the same contours as social and economic exclusion and marginalization, and you realize very quickly that unless we get the transition that we're undertaking right, there's a huge risk of exacerbating existing inequalities, of creating new poverty traps that never existed before. And one thing that I guess, you know, part of the creation of this group was an acknowledgement of the deep divisions that occurred during the conversations around the programme for government, and they broke down on lines of, I suppose, people who prioritised social justice. Now, one concern that was levelled at people in that position was that they weren't pragmatic. To me, I find that a very shocking kind of statement, because realistically the only way we get this done is by treating people fairly, by making sure that everybody can understand that they have a future in our own shared future. And so the pragmatism is that fast climate action has to be inclusive, it has to be fair. I've a short presentation, I won't bore you with slides. I'm not a big fan of slides myself, but I just thought it would break the monotony of looking at me. Just 2 seconds. So, yeah, I was asked to explain just what the just transition greens is. Which, the linguistic thing there always gets me a little bit, because it feels like it should be an R, but it is. So just as we have defined ourselves to begin with, Just Transition Greens is a community of interest within the Green Party. The group is concerned with the strengthening of the party's voice on social justice, democracy and peace, that together with ecology form the 4 pillars of the Green movement. And we will seek to advance the aims of this group across the island of Ireland, within the party, external to it, in government, in the Oireacthas and Northern Ireland Assembly, and at community, local government and European level. And I think that's quite an important realization in all of this, is that the transformation, a just transition, the transformation pathway that we're going on has to involve people at every level of you know, elected representatives, but also community leaders and members of civil society and members of movements across the island. Just a couple of points, I've spoken to it already, but one thing that really strikes me from a climate justice perspective is that as the public realise the very serious danger that climate change poses to their lives, there's a real risk that they will push for action at any cost. Unknowingly, it's a natural human reaction to panic and to wish to see urgent change. But urgent change that tramples on the rights of the poorest and the most vulnerable can't be tolerated. You might know the top right-hand graph there from Oxfam, which highlights globally the unequal distribution of carbon emissions, which is driving the climate crisis. But similar relationships exist at the intra-national level, so within Ireland and within other countries, the poorest people tend to emit the least, and the richest emit the most, significantly more. The idea that we would act without any consideration of human rights and dignity is completely contradictory to green politics, and it's very important that that is understood. Luckily, we have Professor John Barry on next, who will explain a little bit about the history of green politics, the green movement, and the just transition. We have to recognize that there is a mitigation burden that we're facing, and that unless that burden and also the benefits are shared between all people, and that all people can take part and all people can engage in the transformation, in the just transition, then climate action will fail. People will resist unfair action. And so this group is born out of a belief that we simply will not realize the transformation necessary with either business as usual or politics as usual. And we've had a lot of questions since the inception of the group as to what it is about, and why it hasn't just formed a separate party, or why it isn't just simply supporting the Greens in government. But this is an experiment in a new type of politics. So the aims of the group, building on that, is to provide a base for all members of the party and other interested persons to more effectively represent the pillars of social justice, democracy, and peace of the Green Party, both within and outside the party. That's important. Outside too. To give particular attention to the social, economic, and environmental inequality aspects of the transition that we're facing. How the unfair distribution of wealth and the unfair exploitation of resources have grave effects on human society and render our transition more difficult. To support members and elected representatives in communicating and pursuing this agenda of climate action grounded in equality and intergenerational equity. To build capacity and educate members, communities, the public, and external organizations on the fundamental aspects of green politics. And again, we have, we're lucky to have John Barry on the call who'll go into this in more detail. Finally, then we have 2 points to engage external organizations. This will be critical, and in the idea of movement building and transforming our politics, we will need to link in with trade unions and faith communities and business communities, sporting and cultural groups, and moving everyone with the understanding of the enormity of the task that we face. And finally, then, to be expressly and conscientiously feminist in deed and culture, which is of very, very significant importance to us. And I don't know if it serves the meeting to go through one by one the objectives of the group, but I guess this presentation can be shared afterwards. So I mightn't go through them in great detail, but just to point out that we do want to attract and retain members of the party who are interested in social justice, democracy, and the green movement, who may have felt that the programme for government did not reflect their concerns. It is to engage with members directly, including at the National Convention of the Green Party, to engage on a policy basis with the party, and then to liaise with other groups. Again, central to what we do is movement building as well as engaging politically. I'm just again to point out that we want this to be a welcoming and safe place for members, and female members in particular. So with that, I think I won't speak any further. I'll hand over to Oliver, who has the results of that survey. Thanks, guys.
Great, thank you. So I am going to try and share my screen. I have tried this once before on this machine and it didn't work out very well, but we'll see if it works this time. And I think it has. Can you see my screen? Great. Okay, so last week we sent out a survey ahead of this webinar tonight, and the reason for doing so, obviously, we didn't know who would be interested in taking part in the Just Transition Greens, and we want to get a feel for that. We were getting lots of questions, and at my own group meeting here in Cork, people were asking questions: who's involved, what's kind of the age demographic, you know, why are people joining, what kind of interest do they have. So we sent out a survey last week to try and get a picture of that. Both, I suppose, one way to inform the people who wanted to come on this webinar to see, you know, since we can't sit in the same room together with COVID, to kind of get a picture of who you are sitting side by side with virtually. So very good response rate, 130. So we have about 350 something, 350, 400, that kind of range of people signed up to receive emails from us. 130 people completed the survey in the week. In terms of age demographic, it was what we suspected, to be honest with you. It is about 75% of, we'll say, the younger half of Green Party voters. So Green Party voters, median Green Party voter is in their 40s. So 75% of people interested in Just Transition Greens are aged under 40. Where do they live? Good spread around the country. So Dublin, obviously biggest, Munster next, and then Leinster. That's about 75% between those three, and then 25% between Connacht, Ulster and Northern Ireland. Are you a member of the Green Party? So you don't need to be a member of the Green Party to be a member of Just Transition Greens. Part of our kind of our motivation for starting the group was in order to give a space for people who either felt like they were no longer part of the party after the decision to go into government, or didn't want to be part of the party, or the other way around too, that as a way to kind of participate with the Green Party, because some of the feedback later on in the kind of open-ended questions about why people joined the Just Transition Greens, a lot of people are responding along the veins of, well, you know, I've always voted Green, never really felt like joining the Green Party, but this feels like something which is speaking more to kind of my interests. So of the Green Party members, depending on how you answer that question, you're then asked another subset of questions. So the Green Party members, about half are, about a quarter are under a year a member of the Green Party. About half are between 1 and 5 years. And then about a quarter are 5 years or more than 10 years. I regret now in hindsight not splitting up that question a bit more to kind of get a better breakdown of between 1 and 5 years, but about half are that. Are you thinking about leaving the party? So about a quarter either are thinking about leaving or have left already. And then the 75% are kind of split more or less evenly between, no, I'm not going to leave the party, or maybe I'll leave the party. Did you vote for a programme for government? It's pretty much an inversion of what the party itself would be. So about a quarter of people interested in Just Transition Greens voted yes for the programme for government. About 13% didn't vote, and 60% voted no. Is it a good thing for the party? This is a scale, so all of the answers are, it is, the Just Transition Greens is a positive thing for the party. Then what made you sign up? So the top reasons for people wanting to sign up for the Just Transition Greens: I want to increase the visibility of social justice, democracy and peace in the party. I want to be connected with people of similar viewpoints in the party, and I want to organise better to put pressure on government. There were some writing questions to this as well, generally off the same vein, but I would encourage you, I'll pop the link to this into the chat box, and you can read those comments yourselves. So for the people who were not members of the Green Party, so it was about 80-20 split between people who are members of the Green Party and people who are not members of the Green Party. And then of the people who are not members of the Green Party, about 80% were not members of any party. Would the Just Transition Green make you want to join the Green Party? About 40% say no, about say 15% say yes, and about half say maybe. We'll see how we get on. Some interesting writing answers to that as well. And then what would you want to do? Okay, we'll skip that one because it's okay. So what made you join the Just Transition Greens overall? So the top 3 answers for this is I want to push the Green Party more to the left, I want to put pressure on government, and I want to learn more about Green left politics. Interestingly, we had a question underneath here about Professor John Barry is offering to do some courses on Green left politics, and this was one of the most answered open-ended questions I've ever seen. So more than half of respondents filled in ideas for things they wanted education courses on. So from Green left politics to tactics for just transition, how to on policy to practice ideas, how to effectively influence a party's decision as a group, what would a new Green Deal look like for Ireland, strategies and tactics of just transition again, rural issues, new economic possibilities, loads of ideas for educational type courses that the Just Transition group can do. And then there was some lovely comments as well, very encouraging, left at the bottom. I can't go through them all. I wouldn't do justice to them if I tried to skim over them. But what I will do right now, before I hand over to Professor John Barry, is I will drop the link to this document in the chat window. And ask the person who's managing this behind the scenes, if you would like to speak in the discussion part, please put your hand up. If you just have a question but don't want to speak or don't want to be recorded, just ask a question in the Q&A window, and I'll pass it on to the panelists later on. Okay, that's it from me. I'll hand over to John Barry now.
That's great. Thank you, Oliver. And again, I'd like to pay tribute to Oliver and Lorna, who've been driving forces behind this particular initiative. I'm billed to talk about the context of green left movements, but actually what I'm going to talk about really is green politics as eco-socialism. And in the words of Winston Churchill, I've written you a long speech because I haven't had time to write a short one, but I will stay within my 15 minutes or so. My own view is that I've always seen green politics as left-wing, if not all green parties or party members or indeed policies. If pushed, I would contend that ideologically speaking, green politics is a hybrid of democratic socialism, left anarchism and feminism. And it always riled me, and perhaps others on this call here who are members, when the party is viewed, especially in the media, as a single issue environmentalist organisation. And while I don't want to be disrespectful to this organisation, I never viewed the Green Party as friends of the earth with knobs on. Hence, I've always understood myself as Áine mentioned, a watermelon green, or in my own case, a Marxist lentilist. Look it up. And that's important. You know, green politics in general, and a just transition in particular, is not the monopoly of the Green Party or indeed of any party. And that's part of the motivation behind the Just Transition Greens. The importance of building links and creating spaces for discussion with others within and beyond the Green Party interested in a just and inclusive regenerative transition for the island of Ireland. And these, of course, include, most importantly, our communities and our citizens, certainly those in other political parties that share the values and objectives, trade unions, faith communities, and others. I support the formation of the Just Transition Greens because I never believed that old slogan that some of you may have heard, that somehow green politics is neither left nor right, but in front. To paraphrase the late Brazilian environmental eco-activist Chico Mendes, environmentalism without a critique of capitalism is just gardening. And while I think the transition to a low-carbon economy is now inevitable, it's now up there with death and taxes, though hopefully not a punitive carbon tax, whether it's just is not inevitable. Of course, I cannot speak for all Just Transition members, but my own view as an academic researching this for over 30 years and as a red-green activist for longer than that is that our current carbon-based consumer capitalist system, probably too many C's in there, is simply incompatible with, take your pick, the greenhouse gas reduction targets of the Paris 2015 agreement, ensuring a halt to ecocidal economic growth, improving the welfare of all our citizens, or ending the horrific treatment of other sentient animals. In short, capitalism is incompatible with a livable planet. And therefore I support the Just Transition Greens as a left-green eco-socialist initiative for these issues to be brought to our communities and beyond the green movement to prepare them for what is to come in terms of inevitable climate impacts and enable them to find local solutions and demand that the state and local government to fulfill their primary objectives, which is to protect people, planet and place. And I support the Just Transition Greens because, like others, I am convinced that we are now, as Seán said, beyond business and politics as usual. And while electoral politics and state policymaking have their place in any just transition, they are radically insufficient to the task and need to be supplemented by grassroots community mobilisation beyond the state, policies, elections and parties. I am now convinced, after serving for 7 years as a councillor here in Northern Ireland, I'm also a former co-leader of the party here, that the system of liberal representative democracy within a market-based capitalist system is simply incapable of adequately and equitably responding to the planetary emergency we face, at least as it's currently constructed. I've come to the conclusion that the current system is not broke, it was made that way. If we add in related problems of continuing class inequalities and privilege, widening wealth and income gaps, declining human well-being, my considered view is that we have to transcend liberal democratic capitalism if we have to have any chance of mitigating climate breakdown and reversing the accelerating rivet popping of the life-supporting systems of the planet. At the state and the big P politics level, I can see a form of wishful thinking and what might be described as simulative green politics, as governments and their departments, often regardless of which party is in power, blithely press ahead with ecocidal GDP economic growth, which has long passed its sell-by date as an adequate, never mind ecologically rational, measure of social progress. Further to this, we see other forms of wishful thinking in the dominance in our political class of techno-optimistic solutions to the climate crisis, in terms of we see the acceptance at the rhetorical level that we are facing a planetary emergency, as the Dáil and the Assembly and the British Parliament and many councils have declared. We see these emergencies being declared and then nothing, or nothing equivalent to the emergency response we see in relation to the current COVID-19 pandemic. The response to the pandemic is what responding to a real planetary emergency has to look like. So from an eco-socialist perspective, I'm not interested in greening capitalism. A sustainable green society is a different type of society, not a decarbonised version of the current one. Hence the importance of political education to help us debate, understand, disagree, analyse, and hopefully co-create solutions and strategies for a just transition with our communities. The unprecedented existential crisis our species faces is framed by political parties, businesses, the media, even academia, and certainly policymakers as a normal policy challenge that can and only must be framed within those parameters. However, the planetary emergency is a state of exception, not something that can or ought to be shoehorned into the normal policy process and its incremental, crabwise reformist logic. As if the planet and its non-human living and geochemical processes give a damn about the Overton window of policy making. This is what it means to listen to the science, as Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion properly remind us. To continue in this provocative and radical vein, but remember, radical simply means getting to the root cause of a problem, existing liberal capitalism and the core state imperative of endless GDP growth, often jobless growth, as we've experienced in Ireland, has certainly now passed this threshold beyond which these are dysfunctional, suboptimal, and dangerous. We have now reached the stage where serious debate is given to Elon Musk and his dreams of colonizing Mars, but where somebody proposing that we need to transition beyond capitalism and liberal democracy are viewed as utopian, misguided, dangerous, clinically mature, not pragmatic, or in the sage words of a member of the Irish communitariat, painfully woke. More worryingly, perhaps, we have reached the stage where our young people, perhaps most clearly evident in those involved in the youth strike for climate movement, can now imagine the end of the world easier than the end of capitalism. The climate anxiety experienced and felt by these young people who do not have a vote, though thankfully they do have a voice outside electoral politics, should bring shame on our generation. Just as John Steinbeck wisely noted in his novel, The Grapes of Wrath, that if you're in trouble or hurt or need, go to poor people. They're the only ones that'll help, the only ones. Likewise, I would suggest we need to look beyond and below the nation state and electoral politics for inspiration and examples of thinking and doing beyond ecocidal capitalism. We need to dig where we stand. In our increasingly earthly and socially turbulent times, where the UK is not simply exiting the EU, but we as a species are exiting the climate stability of 10,000 years known as the Holocene for the new dynamically unstable Anthropocene, I want to suggest that we look to creating community-based responses that might, just might, help us navigate, adapt and minimize the pain and suffering and maximize the multiple co-benefits of transitioning to a low-carbon, green, regenerative economy and society. To paraphrase the Scottish novelist Alistair Gray, we should be inspired and we should transition as if we're in the early days of building back better and creating a healthier, more sustainable and egalitarian society. And while this is not always the case, just transition thinking and acting is very often oppositional, experimental, risky, confrontational, and can be characterized as sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle, forms of resistance to centralized, distant, homogenizing and command and control imperatives. And amen to that. Dissent, disagreement and discord should not be viewed negatively on this account. And the reasons for this are twofold. Firstly, any just transition to a post-carbon, post-capitalist society will produce winners and losers, thus necessitating conflict transformation processes within any sustainability transition. And as such, dissent and disagreement need not be valued, disvalued and discouraged, and they need to be included. Democracy, one of the key values of the Green Party, after all, can be viewed as a form of non-violent, respectful disagreement. And it's not just about consensus based on the lowest common denominator. Secondly, this oppositional, non-conformist, and sometimes outright confrontational character can mobilize the energy and insight for improvement and societal progress. As George Bernard Shaw astutely commented, and we forgive him the sexism of the time in which he wrote this, he said, "The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man." Perhaps, just perhaps, with our house on fire, as Greta Thunberg rightly and continually reminds us, it might be time for us to be unreasonable and to do what is necessary. So, what the Just Transition Greens and eco-socialism represents for me is that we are facing the end of the world as we know it. But that's okay. The end of the world as we know it is not the end of the world. So thanks for listening. I hope you will stay connected and contribute to the work that we're doing. So stay safe and socially distance from neoliberalism. Good night.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much for that, John. That was very good. Wow. Yeah, someone is asking, there will be, someone is asking for a copy of that speech. I don't know if you have it written out, John, but there is recorded, this is all recorded anyway. So yeah, that's grand. Okay, Neasa, do you want to give us the Oireactas perspective?
Can I just say it's really unfair that I have to come in after that speech? I hate John Barry.
But you govern in prose, Neasa, you govern in prose. So there's the
and I
prose
also
section.
will be requiring a copy of that speech to steal from liberally. And yeah, so thank you, John, and thanks, Lorna. And thank you to both Seán and Oliver and Áine and all of the people who have, you know, contributed to this project over the last few, or the last, is it 6 weeks even? I mean, I certainly haven't really pulled my weight in organizing all of this stuff because just, you know, time is short these days. But I do think it's an interesting and it's a like a point of kind of, I don't know, is it political dissent or is it a jumping off point that I'm really excited about. And look, to be perfectly honest, it's been a difficult few months, and there are times when I wonder, or a bit of me wonders, how I got here exactly. And I hear that from, you know, other people, both inside and outside the party. You know, how did we get here? And it's strange times. And I think lots of what John spoke about resonated with me. The idea that somehow what we're facing in terms of the climate and biodiversity crisis is a normal political challenge, and it is something that can be answered in that way. And I guess one of the things I've been struggling with in the last few months, and because it's been so difficult, and I do feel that, you know, in life, sometimes when you're going through the most difficult times, you learn the most. And I've learned that I don't know how to do a politics that separates, you know, environmental justice from tax justice. I don't know how to do politics where the provision of housing is separated from decisions around how we make our communities or biodiversity, or decisions around sustainable land use being divided from things like labour law or human rights. I don't understand how that version of politics will either serve us, you know, as a group, hopefully with a, you know, a political green vision, but I suppose more fundamentally how it will serve the climate crisis and serve the climate justice cause. So I know from myself, and as I said, you know, like I didn't even join the Greens until 2012, and I came to it kind of gradually. I was rooted in a background of environmental design and architecture, and realizing, you know, how fundamental the change would have to be. And it's been a journey of discovery and realization. And the realization that I've had for some time now is that I am a politician of the left. I feel that kind of intuitively, and I don't understand a green politics or a politics that speaks to climate justice that doesn't also speak to social justice. And I don't know how those two things can be separated or would be separated in an effective way. But I've also come to the conclusion, actually, and that's why some of what John was saying is so interesting to me, is that because I didn't jump into green politics straight away, or the Green Party straight away. It was something gradual. That I also don't feel that some of the existing socialist models, you can't clip climate justice onto those. You can't retro engineer the scale of the climate crisis into most of the existing left theory. And so the scale of how we're going to have to reform our financial system, our political system, how we can think of human rights, how we think of tax, how we think of land use, how we feed ourselves, the historical context through which we make our governments, and how we treat people, colonialism, all of that stuff. You can't retro engineer climate justice back into existing models. It has to be formative to those models. It has to be at the base level of how you think of all aspects of our society and our governance. And I guess when I think of like the last few months or the months ahead, I don't think it's any secret to say that the programme for government wasn't all that I wanted it to be, and I didn't support it at the time, and my concerns around it are probably well documented. I think over the next few months it's going to be very, very difficult, and I think it's worth saying at this point that for people like me who kind of from, I suppose, an Oireactas point of view, my interest in the Just Transitions Greens is not to, I have no interest in tempering like any critical analysis that might be forthcoming. I'm not scared of that, and I'm a big girl, and I think critical analysis and critical discussion is incredibly important here. And I think that was part of my interest, is that I have been involved in the policy council within the party for a really long time, and as anyone who's suffered through the long sessions of policy making in the party will know, is I don't want to shut down any hard discussions. I think we should have them. And as Lorna will know from when we did the reproductive rights stuff, is sometimes those sessions will be 6 or 8 hours and whatever, but let's have the hard discussions and let's have the rows. And as long as we can be respectful of each other, not necessarily each other's point of view even, I think it's worthwhile having those discussions. And I guess what my interest in, from a selfish point of view, what I'm looking for from the Just Transition Greens, and I do think of like some of the people involved. So I mean, like Oliver and Sean and Lorna and people like Liam Quaid and all of these, and I see Sophie's on the call, and you know, there's some great people in the group, and I guess at quite a difficult time, what I'm looking for is solidarity and the sharing of knowledge, and having those really, you know, worthwhile discussions and discovering stuff around how we move forward. Alliance rather than allegiance, and some kind of formation or progression of a progressive left that is based in climate justice. I think it's really exciting to be at the beginning of something like this. You know, when I joined the Green Party, I joined Dublin Central, and it wasn't very strong there. I think there was less than 30 members, and they never met. And when I told my family I was thinking about maybe running for councillor, they all laughed. They all laughed and said, "Why don't you join a proper party?" And I think that I'm very comfortable not knowing what the road ahead looks like. That's something I've done before. I think it's actually a creative place to be and a useful place to be. And when I'm under pressure, I realize that I tend to work harder, and that's also good and creative. And I think my favorite part of this is that ambiguity. And I know it's driving the media crazy, and I know it's driving them mad that we won't do one thing or the other. And I think what Sean said is right, is that this is a new way and trying something new. And maybe it is a bit unreasonable, and maybe it is a bit naive, but I'm not ashamed about either of those things. So I want it to be a bit amorphous and generous at the moment, and I want it to be full of people who are asking difficult questions. And I need, you know, I think we all maybe just need a few months to think about, you know, the lie of the land. So I'm going to reiterate, I guess, what John said is, I think we should dig where we stand, and I think I'm going to stand and fight in whatever way I can and whatever way that looks. And I'm hoping this will be, you know, a creative, interesting, provocative, thought-provoking group to be a part of. And I'm hoping that both the elected members and the non-elected members can have a full, sorry, my kids are coming out in the background, a full and frank exchange of views, and leave everything on the table and discuss everything. So that's pretty much me.
Great, thanks a million, Neasa. And it was really, thank you so much as well for coming to this meeting, and I suppose being an open member of the organisation, because I know that probably is not making your life very easy. But thank you for that. And it is,
I can't get any more of a black sheep at the moment, or it doesn't really matter.
Well, we're a flock of black sheep. There's a flock of us here now, so that's good. So what we're going to move on to now at this point is there are some questions that are already, there's people lined up and happy to speak on it. As Oliver was saying, you can make statements as well, that's okay. But I suppose just to be aware that if you're doing that, that you would be going on camera. So if you're comfortable with that, because this is being recorded for bye, John. Thank you. Have a good dinner. Bye. Yeah. So yeah, it's just to make it accessible to people who couldn't possibly have made it at this time. So that's where we're going next. So I believe there are 2 people lined up already, Oliver.
That is correct. I'll just hand over to Evan if you're good to talk, Evan.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Grand. Hi, my name is Evan Pereira. I'm from Kildare South. I'm now a recent resignee from the Green Party, I guess. And first of all, just thanks to everyone involved in organising the Just Transition Greens, because, you know, I do kind of still want to be kept in the loop, and I think it will be beneficial for the party to have a Green left eco-socialist group. And I, just thinking back through my time in the party, there were members I talked to who I think, you know, they really considered the environment their, you know, one and only issue, and, you know, kind of issues of social justice, housing, homelessness, healthcare, you know, environmental and social issues, economic and social issues, they kind of consider that secondary. And I would be of the view that it's all intersectional. You know, we can have real progressive radical climate action without bringing, you know, with us all of Ireland, north and south, rural people, the working class, and we need to ensure we don't leave anyone behind. And I just remember from the general election, you know, knocking on doors, and even in my own local area, where my area would be, you know, working class and rather low income, you know, people would say to me, I don't have time to be worrying about the environment. You know, I have housing, I have, you know, rent to be paying, you know, I don't have time to worry about any of that. And that's a genuine view from people, and I don't blame them for, you know, not seeing the environment as the most major issue on their plate when, you know, people are facing evictions, people are facing hospital waiting lists, increased education costs. So I think this group will be very productive in kind of combining social issues and economic issues with the discussion and sort of policies on the environment, and ensuring that we do have a just transition. So, you know, I'm looking forward to see what happens next, and thanks for allowing me to speak, and thanks for everyone for coming out. And I know John Barry isn't here anymore, but I don't think I could have fallen in love with words any more than just now. Thanks, Cllr Áine Groogan.
Might just hand over to Sophie as well, Lorna. Sophie had a fairly similar sort of question.
Yeah, go on, Councillor Sophie. Up.
Hello. I don't know if you can see me or not. So my question was that if I put myself in the shoe of a voter in my constituency, which is Ballyfam Drimna, including Cherry Orchard, underprivileged area, why would I bother with this group of Just Transition Greens? Because it is part of the Green Party, which is a capitalist party. So that's my question. That's what I asked myself as well, and that's what I don't know what I will answer to people who voted for me, or just people who from my constituency. So that's my question. At the same time, I'm very excited. But at the same time, being within the Green Party, I'm not sure. I'm worried that people are going to think we're hypocrites. And so, but I'm very excited. I'm in France right now, which is very inspiring, seeing a lot of French mayors that have been working now for a month and been allying with the left parties. So that's how that would be for me a way to go. So so that's it for me. Thank you, and thanks everyone for all the hard work you put on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophie, and thank you for joining us from France. Oh my gosh, fair
Yes.
play. Thank you so
Yes.
much. That's really nice of you to come. I suppose I'll open those two questions or comments up to the panel as a whole. I suppose one thing to note at the start of this, really, because I have been reading through the questions, and a lot of the questions are sort of framed in a way that's very much like, you know, what is the committee of Just Transition Greens going to decide for the group as a whole to do? There was one very good one from Simon Wood, actually, that sort of answered the question, which is, you know, being sort of suspicious or suspect. Recent political movements like XR and Black Lives Matter are very distrustful of leaders. Should Just Transition Greens be the same? We are the same, I suppose, in terms of being very distrustful of leaders. So myself and Cllr Groogan are interim co-leaders. We are hoping at some point that we would be having an AGM and that we would be electing to have co-leaders, but we decided from the very start that we wanted to have a co-leader model, simply because having everything, you know, in a hierarchy up to one person and the buck stops here kind of thing does lead to problems and does lead to trouble. So that's something that that we're doing. And I suppose in terms of how I would see this organization going forward, and this goes back to how we're going to answer your questions this evening. Like, your questions, we mightn't necessarily even have answers for them, because it's not me, it's us, like, and it's not any individual, it's us. Like, we're a team and a group now, and I suppose the reason why we're having, you know, half of this entire presentation is as questions and Q&A and statements from people is we want to hear from you. Like, we want to know how exactly we should be going about organizing, or what shape that you see this going forward, because it is very ambiguous at the moment. And I am getting a lot of questions at the moment from members or from media or from various different quarters, Twitter, a lot of that kind of question of like, well, why don't you just split? Why are you still in the Green Party? Like, it is very ambiguous at the moment, what we are doing. And the reason why it's ambiguous is that we are looking towards our membership actually to tell us, and you know, that is different to other political organizations, so that does actually make it kind of difficult to answer your questions as well. So it will be a bit ambiguous, it'll be a bit chaotic, and it's not going to be the shape of any other political organization that currently exists in Ireland. That's the way I can see things going, and that's a bit scary, but it's good as well. So that's just to kind of do that. But yes, does anyone else on the panel have any thoughts on those two ones, or do you want to go back to the members?
I think Sophie's point is really important, Lorna, about why would a constituent of hers want to join this group, and I don't think right now we can comfortably say that they should want to join this group. I think we have to prove the worth of what we want to do in the transformation that's necessary, and John alluded to it, and everyone has so far. But you know, green politics has for too long in recent years in Ireland been associated with classes, upper middle class and above, and we need to work as constructively as we can in a community building kind of way to bring people in and to earn trust and to earn respect. And so I think, Sophie, I don't know if there is a way until that mission of work is complete, and as Lorna says, it requires everyone, and hopefully we can do it, but it'll, you know, we need to build trust in ourselves, and then help others build trust in us.
I will say something very briefly, and that's essentially, this party isn't a party of capitalism to me. It's not I joined a socialist party. That's it. I get, obviously, maybe I'm coming from a different perspective from being in the north, but I'm very clear what the party I joined is and the party I want to be in is. I know there's a lot of, yeah, it's hard to know what the right move is. in terms of the Southern Party, in terms of being in government. But I think there's a general acceptance we need to do something, that we can't just go, oh, we're in government now, that's it. Okay, we either leave or we put up with it. That's not the only two options here. It may become the only two options, you don't know, but I think that's why most people have come into this vehicle, because they don't want to be driven out of a party that they feel is maybe taking a misstep. And I think it's about working and doing what we can to maybe change that from within. Maybe that's naive, maybe that won't happen, but I'm very firm in the belief that I am a member of the Socialist Party, and I will not be budged on that one.
Okay. Lorna, we have a question from Laura Donaghy.
Hi folks, can you hear me? Oh, sorry, that was very
Perfect.
to say. Sorry. Thanks very much for letting me talk. One of the things that came through really strongly for me when the programme for government was being debated was there are a lot of people within the Green Party mainstream who are really not used to seeking votes from people who aren't already on board with the Green movement or don't identify themselves as being kind of embedded in the Green movement. One of the most striking moments in that whole debate for me was a few occasions where people mentioned the conflict that Evan had just talked about there, about how carbon tax is anathema to people who are struggling with childcare or rent. And when that was raised in a few Green Party forums, people were accused of it being a right-wing climate denial argument, rather than a recognition of a genuine barrier that faces implementation of green politics and bring people on board with green politics. I don't have any immediate plans to leave the party. I still think it most closely matches what my own views are. And Just Transition Greens is a really, really welcome home within the Green Party that can hold the government to account and hold our public representatives at every level to account, and make sure that the government is pursuing genuinely green policies rather than just policies that are implemented by a green minister. But this group has come in for a lot of criticism from people in the mainstream Green Party saying, surely everyone's interested in just transition, everyone's interested in fairness and social justice. And the inference being taken is that members of this group are somehow, quote, virtue signaling or trying to indicate that other people don't care as much as we do about social justice or about social issues. So my question, in a very long-winded way, is how do we make sure that while this affiliate group is open to people who are both in the party and outside the Green Party, and it's really important to build bridges beyond party bounds, but how do we make sure that we maintain those links within the party and make people feel that we aren't just a lobby group or aren't just, I've heard the term sore loser bandied about, despite the fact that this is quite a heterogeneous group in terms of support for the programme for government. How do we make sure that the Green Party in general is prepared to listen to us, that they see us as constructive rather than continually criticising what the government is doing? And I just was wondering what the current committee feel about that, or what kind of approaches you have in mind.
Can I come in there, Lorna?
Yeah, go on.
I mean, look, I think what you've identified there is kind of it's like the $1 million question, and I have heard that kind of polarization of and that characterization of this as a way of sectioning off a piece of the party that cares about one particular thing. I think first, I suppose we need to think about the praxis of how we practice being Just Transition Greens. And I personally am not interested in it being something divisive for people within the Green Party who are trying to affect change. And I see one of the ways of doing that is as granular, right? So what I mean by that is that through every policy and through every action and through every decision, there needs to be a kind of a critical analysis saying, look, this particular policy initiative or this particular announcement could have been done this way, or these are the issues that in terms of social justice that need to be flagged, not in a kind of a virtue signaling way. And I don't think in practice for each particular issue, it would be. I think if it becomes like, look, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not interested in a group that like lives on Twitter, right? Because we see other political groups doing that, that lives on Twitter to kind of shout from the sidelines, which is one of the other criticisms that this the beginnings of this group got. I'm interested in something that's much more detailed, and I do think when you look at things, you know, when you look at kind of the theory around introducing diversity into decision making, that's one of the things that is constantly flagged, that, you know, that there's a diversity of perspective there, and I guess I think that's partly what's happening in this group, is that there was a perspective that was felt that was missing from the programme for government, that needs to be injected into every activity and area that we do and that we're involved in. And we'll lose some of those arguments and we'll win some of those arguments, but I think it's worth being in there saying, you know what, like this bike lane is worthwhile, but maybe you want to think about the location because people in the inner city don't own cars, and you're putting it out in an area where lots of people own cars. And, you know, so that idea that like the social justice aspects and the economic issues align and should inform decision making, I think that isn't a sitting on the sidelines shouting issue. I think that's being right in the middle of it in a very practical, granular way in every single decision. This is the bit of social justice that you need to consider. That would be my way, and I'm not interested in othering people in the party or implying that other people aren't interested in social justice. It's just bringing a diversity of perspective into the discussion.
Any other panelists have answers for that one?
Maybe just quickly, Lorna, I'd say about the point that we've made about linking with movements. You know, it's to your like, if we're talking about carbon tax, for example, we know that it's been debated to some extent within environmental bodies and environmental organizations, but really that net has to be spread much wider, and we need to listen to organizations who deal with the elderly or organizations who deal with people living in poverty. And there's like a mutual capacity building that has to happen where all sides of these conversations can fully grasp what a just transition means and understand the ramifications of climate action, because you know, there has been an acceptance for an awful long time that a carbon tax is a key fundamental cornerstone of climate action. Well, it can only be if there's an awful lot of other things in place that make sure it's fair and that make sure alternatives are available. Giving voice to those issues is very important.
Very good. I think that's it pretty much answered. I suppose just one thing I would add is that, you know, there is a lot of defensiveness at the moment, I think, because in my experience, it seems to be coming from people in particular who do actually have social consciences and in some sense know that they're doing something that is wrong. And they tend to be the most aggressive in terms of painting this organization as something that is, you know, out to point out hypocrisy or out to get them. And, you know, I think we need to be open and welcoming, because, you know, even making the decision to go into government in some sense, I think for a lot of people that was quite difficult emotionally, and to do that too, you know. So I think we do need to be kind of open and welcoming, and to give people a path back to discussing issues of social justice. And that's why it's actually difficult for us to do things right now, this very moment as well, because, you know, there is a lot of that aggression there. But I think in time we might actually get back to a place where we can sort of have these discussions in a way that people don't have a natural kind of reaction to. We have further questions, or Oliver? Yeah.
We have Paul Carl can come in a second. I just have two questions from people who can't join for different reasons or can't show their video. One is, what is the expected input of non-Green Party members to this group? Or rather, what can they input if they're not affiliated? And the second question is, there seems to be very little in relation to climate action, regenerative practices or biodiversity. I would have thought that this would be a starting point of a green movement. Maybe I'm missing something and this is already taken as a given. But I will add Paul Carroll right now. If you want to go ahead, Paul.
Sorry for jumping in there a bit early. I sent that question in the chat earlier than I intended, but this is a bit of a kind of a difficult one, I recognise, but Green Party makes a lot of claims about being non-hierarchical, and it's not true. Like there's a lot of informal toxic hierarchies, you know, like I kind of gave the example in my question of you see how Roisin Garvey is treated as opposed to Lorna Bogue. I see a lot of the same rhetoric of democracy and non-hierarchy here, and I would be worried about how in the absence of hierarchy and there can form toxic ones, how will the Just Transition Greens try and avoid that?
That's a really good question. Obviously, I plan on being extremely toxic, and this is a vehicle for me to do so. I think what you're saying is right, Paul, and there's a very good essay about this. It's the Tyranny of Structurelessness. That's a very good one, I think, in general to read in environmental movements in particular. We've actually already reached out to other organizations in terms of getting practical guidelines as to how to have a space where we can actually, you know, have robust conversations while also not doing things that are just completely off the wall, like, because I mean, we've all experienced that. So from my own personal experience, I have no intention of reproducing those dynamics again. So we will over time have, well, actually it's one of the first things I want to do is to have a very robust set of guidelines and a constitution for this organization that just makes it extremely clear how we actually interact with each other. Like that's just a given, I think. And because like while we're, you know, like activist burnout is a very real thing, and that's not something that we want to be doing in this particular organization either, because this organization itself needs to be as robust as the challenge it faces, which is climate crisis. So looking after people is very, is a top priority of mine anyway. Other panelists have answers on that or on the previous two questions that were there? Oliver, you may need to remind us of the other two questions if you can. Yeah, go ahead, Alia.
I was going to say, yeah, I can't remember the first two questions.
I'll ask the first two questions again, just to remind. So one was the expected input of non-Green Party members to the group. And then what the second was just surprised that there was very little mention of climate action and biodiversity and gender practices by the group.
I can take some of that. Well, on the second question, I mean, I think I said earlier that to me that stuff is formative in the same way that social justice is formative. So to divide one from the other just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. You know, they're two parts of the same discussion. So I don't think there hasn't been any. It's not being left out, but perhaps there is some kind of a response to the program for government where the, you know, there's a kind of an implication perhaps that as long as the climate targets were agreed, everything else, you know, can kind of row in behind it, and perhaps there's a that's kind of coloring the discussion we're having tonight. I don't know, but certainly for me, you know, those two things sit side by side in parallel. And on the first question, I think, I mean, look, I think what's come through from tonight is that I see this as a bit of creative chaos. Like, I'm sure there's a better term for that. I know there is in art, of kind of useful and exploratory chaos. And so I don't know how either non-members or members of other political parties want to contribute, but I certainly, like, I I welcome dissenting and interesting and new voices, and I think that it speaks to what Lorna was saying earlier about, you know, how you put a structure on things without dampening the discourse, and I think that remains to be seen. Like we have to move together towards that, and we have to build that together. But that's something that is exciting to me, rather than something, you know, to kind of control too carefully.
Yeah, just a brief thing on that. Like, I do think that something that has become very apparent to those of us who have just come out of the Green Party or are still members of the Green Party, because I am aware that if you're not a member of the Green Party or are the member of another party, this does seem a bit like, you know, green, green, green. Like, we don't mean it to be that way, but a lot of us are like working through some stuff right now with the Green Party. No, it's just that we've all been institutionalized as being members of the Green Party. And it sort of goes back to what Sean was saying, which is that we have to try and break out or transcend the idea of political party structure in and of itself, because I think that has kind of really just dampens down things. It means that the best thing doesn't get done quite often, and it means all these kind of bun fights happen all the time on the left, where we're, you know, it's small, minute kind of differences that we're actually arguing about, rather than the general direction in which we're going. So I suppose, like, I again, like Neasa, like, I think people from other parties do add a new dynamic that is really, really interesting. And again, like, the media just can't get their minds around it. Like, it doesn't fit in, like, it's messy, they don't like it, and they then start talking about entryism and, you know, people coming in and taking over the party and that kind of stuff. So that's not it at all. Like, I think it adds real vibrancy to the organization, and it gives us different ways of thinking. And, you know, we are trying to transcend the idea of a political organization, at least in my own mind anyway, because again, as Sean says, like, climate crisis requires everyone. We need everyone with us, and so everyone is welcome in this particular organization. Okay, there's another question.
Yeah, that's right. Rob would like to ask a question on how we interact with government.
Cool, yeah, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yeah, I can't seem to put on my camera, so I'm really sorry for Paula. But yeah, no, so just, this is how I've written it out anyway. In matters that weren't included in the programme for government, we've seen that the right-wing side of this government wins out, and the example I would use is the treatment of sex workers. They weren't allowed pandemic payment, and the funding was given to an anti-sex worker organisation, but not given to a sex worker organisation. How could this group be supportive of the party in government, or avoid being critical, when this is the, admittedly brief, track record so far?
I should probably answer that, should I? But I don't know how to answer that. I guess my initial response to that is, I don't think we should start off by saying we will be supportive or we will be critical. Either way, I think it's something that we're going to have to develop as a group. Maybe Sean has, or we've lost Sean, have we? Has a view on that, or Lorna? I don't really want to set the march for this group in that way yet, and I'm having my own struggles at the moment with that, Rob, as is playing out very publicly right now. So I'm going to hand over to someone else.
I'll come in there really quick and just say, you know, it's Green Party policy to have a more flexible whip system within the Dáil. There are issues that are totally outside anything that was agreed in the programme for government that are coming up to be discussed, and there's an assumption that we vote along with them, even if they go against our party principles. So it's like for Neasa and for others, it's a very complex situation, because we have quite an archaic whip system in this country. Now, if we're talking about moving beyond politics as usual, one of the things we should presumably look at is how do systems like the whip function, and whether we can arrive at places where legislation genuinely is debated, where opposition and government opinions are taken on board in order to win the greatest amount of support to get a piece of legislation over the line. That would be genuinely progressive politics, I would think, and movement towards something that we
could all be proud of in this country. And so I don't think there's anything sinister here. It's an effort to try to create a type of politics in this country that we can all stand over.
I feel like Oliver might want to come in on that one. You've unmuted yourself, and you do love political reform.
I do, but I think Neasa and Sean have answered very well. I have a question from Roisin Cudahy, who unfortunately can't speak for herself because she's in a playground at the minute and it's quite noisy. But the question she wants to ask is, and this might be something you're interested in, Lorna, will the Just Transition Greens speak to and collaborate with other left-leaning parties? Wholeheartedly agree with what Lorna has just said. I can't remember what that was. But the question is, will the Just Transition Greens collaborate with other left-leaning parties?
Yeah, definitely. I think that our political education project, which John was talking about, does include other parties as well. Like, again, this isn't just limited to the Green Party. If we have members from other parties coming into this organisation, for example, you know, we should be, I suppose, even if we ourselves can't criticise directly something that is being done by the Green Party in government, although to be fair, you know, and I think you know, Rob O'Sullivan deserves a lot of thanks for all of the PR work that they've been putting in on this. We've been pretty much out on almost every issue thus far, so I don't really think that it's going to be the case that we're going to not say things. But in terms of like how other members of other parties interact with us, like, I would hope that, you know, through all of the brilliant suggestions that people have given into the political education piece in the survey, that we would actually be creating almost a toolkit so that other political parties and organisations actually get and understand just transition as well, so that we're spreading the idea to them too, and we're seeding those ideas with other political organisations. So it's a little bit like reverse centuryism in a way. Sorry everyone who's just joined from another party. Our plan is to, our sneaky plan is to get you to learn about just transition and bring it back to your own political organisations. But I think a part of this as well is that something that became very, very clear during the programme for government discussions as well, in terms of like how the media was looking at the Green Party, is that all of the just transition stuff or anything to do with the environment, it was basically like, well, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael have nothing to do with that. They know nothing about it. It's not their thing, but the Green Party is there. So, you know, there you go, box it off. You deal with that now. And that's wrong. Like, that's completely wrong. Like, again, going back to everyone has to do something about climate crisis. Like, every political party has to do something about climate crisis as well. So we have to, I suppose, invert that idea of entryism and push ourselves out towards other political organisations. And that kind of answers Rob's question as well, because in terms of providing criticisms and critique, like, we're giving the language to other parties to critique the government in a way that would be most effective and efficient for them as well. You know, so like I think there's definitely things that could be done there, because I know from some of the stuff that the Green Party in government has voted against, I mean, some of it was kind of poorly constructed. Like, let's be honest here about that. Like, you know, in principle, it would be stuff that we would actually want to be voting in favour of, but if it's poorly constructed in the first instance, you know, nobody on the left should be giving the government that excuse. And it is about providing that assistance as well. I hope that kind of makes sense.
I think it's good. We are coming to the end of our questions. I see one here from Philip O'Halloran. I don't know if Philip would like to ask the question directly. If you do want to, Philip, the floor is yours.
Can anyone hear me? Yeah. Yeah, so basically I'll just read out what I said in Q&A. So like, when it comes to actually advocating and sort of pushing for these goals of achieving a sort of a just transition, but like, how do we achieve this both within the Green Party itself and outside of conventional politics? How do we organize? How should we try and provide this kind of pressure and impetus for change, both internally within the party and externally when it comes to sort of like building coalitions and stuff?
I don't know, do you guys want to come in first, or Philip? Well, I know Philip knows that I love a position paper. And you know, people like Sean and everything. To me, there's no substitution for serious policy work and serious policy discussions, and I'm hoping that that's one of the places that we start. And obviously, I like other people on the panel, I've been involved in lots of different activist groups, and I'm probably somebody else can speak more meaningfully to how we harness those and make networks there. But I personally, I love a good bit of research and putting out really good information, and you know, reasons for why it's a good, you know, things are, you know, worthwhile doing. So that's one of the areas that I'm going to work on, is putting out into the ether and into the public sphere information and policy work on how you make the transition just.
I might jump in there as well. I think, Philip, like, to me, a lot of this comes back to what John said in some of his opening sentences of his speech, which was the Green Party, it doesn't own the climate movement, it doesn't own just transition. And Oliver has said this many times, it's a very important concept, is humble politics. And being trying to instill the idea of servant leadership, which actually then begins to move us beyond the suspicion and the doubt that people have in politics in general, and move beyond the clientism that actually could cause serious damage in trust in terms of progressing a political agenda, and actually get to a point where we are building movements with the movement builders. You know, like people out there are brilliant at organizing. People out there are brilliant at bringing together, like we've seen the Black Lives Matter movement and how it has taken hold in Dublin, and an incredibly moving event, and the Children's Climate Strikers. And it's not about co-opting those movements, but existing in harmony with them and being a point that they can touch off if need be to impact decision making as well.
Something for me, I think, if anyone knows one of our councillors up here, Brian Smith, it's been one thing he was really involved with. He's a big guy from the New Lodge. He doesn't speak like your normal politician, but he's very, very good at connecting to people and distilling down what being green means to people in their everyday lives. And for me, I think that's going to be particularly, sorry, I'm directing this here, going to be particularly important as we go forward as the Just Transition Greens, and you know, with Greens being in government as well, in terms of things that are happening, may not necessarily, that was the whole obvious concern with the programme for government, in terms of that some of the measures may be green in theory, but you know, they're going to hit maybe the least well off most, in particular in terms of regressive taxation and things like that. So for me, a key thing for Just Transitions Greens in terms of how we go forward is about distilling that, I suppose, like academic message into what it means to people's everyday lives and how it affects them, and making it less academic and more practical. Kind of give an example, because I feel I'm not explaining myself very well. Like up here, we have done a massive campaign around air quality, or air pollution, as probably should be rightly termed, and it can be quite up here a bit of the time, and you can become quite academic with it all and stats and the figures, and it can kind of alienate people. But when you distill it down to people going, right, all those inner city communities are the most affected, but they're much less likely to own a car. They're plagued by pavement parking, and can't take their children to school safely. They have to go out onto the road. Children with asthma, in terms of linking into that. That's how you bring it home. So you're having your green message, but you make it real for people, and you make it something that they can understand, not in a condescending way, but just in something like I said, green movements can be a little bit lofty sometimes, and it's about really bringing that back down. I said, Councillor Smith was on the call. He'd probably speak this a bit better than I can, but I'm just trying to kind of portray what my vision would be for it.
Great. The next, Lorna and Áine, the next question we have is about what positive contribution can Northern Greens make to the Just Transition Greens? And it relates to another comment from somebody else. which is around the future and talking with left-leaning parties down south, and whether that could create problems for northern members given the link of a maid to the obvious.
I think I might speak to that if that's okay. I think
We'll just before you go, we'll allow Will. Would you like to ask your question directly or speak to this?
Yeah, it was just basically what you had said. Was where do the Northern Greens fit in? I'm a Northerner myself, obviously, and we do tend to be quite left-leaning as a whole. And there was a lot of interest in the JTG whenever it started up. And I was just wondering where we fit in this equation as the Just Transition Greens go forward, and what contribution we can make, given that we might be slightly semi-detached from the process of what's going on in government in Dublin.
Okay, yeah, we are a little bit disconnected, I suppose, from the everyday workings of the Southern government. But like I mentioned earlier, we've never really properly embraced the fact we are an all-island party. But I think in our current context, we really need to kind of get a grapple of that. We've got Brexit, we've got climate crisis, and all of these will affect both sides of the border. And particularly, I mean, thinking in terms of the programme for government, there was commitments to the A5 road, an issue which Northern Greens have actively campaigned against. So I think there's some very obvious issues in terms of the Northern Greens, in terms of the government in the south, that we do have an input in and should have an input in. But I think just as a movement going forward, you know, I think it's right that we maybe start engaging a bit better. There's issues that affect us the same way, and we have the same sort of challenges. We are more left-leaning, I think. I think that's become perhaps a little bit more apparent, at least to me anyway. So, but I know we're not, maybe I phrase that wrong. I suppose there is definitely, as we've seen from this, there's a lot of left-leaning members in the south, and it's maybe not right to say we're more left-leaning in the Southern Greens, because I don't think that's right. I just think perhaps the programme for government maybe doesn't necessarily reflect with all of us, but we all have a common goal and a common commitment here, and it's important that we do kind of have a bit more of an equality in kind of in terms of how we're addressing those things. And it's just, I suppose, we're getting Northern members involved. Like I said, a lot of Northern members didn't even realise we were an all-island party, for various reasons, which probably don't have a forum to go into here, but it is in terms of, I suppose, United Ireland kind of issues and things like that. Obviously, it's quite complex for us, and in terms of certain other all-island parties, it gets a lot more complex for us. But we need to be here, we need to be around the table and having that discussion, because I don't think we have been. It's worked both ways in terms of we've both kind of operated in silos and we can't continue. We'll have talked around that. So if anyone else, any of the Southern Greens has a perspective on it, feel free to come in. But it's really important that we are have a voice in this, because it is going to affect both sides of the border, and we've seen that. We're starting to look at different issues, particularly like mining is something that's massive for us here, but it's the exact same issues are being faced throughout Ireland. And it's important that we all kind of work together on them.
Yeah, it's a great question, Will, because it's something that just deeply concerned me during the whole programme for government process. Like even this attitude down here in the south, which was, you know, well, I'm in Donegal, so west here in the south, where people thought, you know, well, what are the Northern Greens doing voting in this? And that kind of really dismissive attitude that emerged, that I was just particularly unhappy about as well. What I think Áine, it is actually fair to say that that the Northern Greens are more left-leaning in general than the Southern Greens. I'll say it if you don't feel comfortable saying it. Yeah, I think a lot of the environmental issues in particular do like they don't respect borders, and they are issues that all of us here in this group do need to be active on and be drawing attention to. And like as Áine was saying, we're hoping to start a sacrifice zones kind of series where we're talking about environmental degradation that's happening all over the island of Ireland, and just, you know, being more proactive in terms of our messaging, because it has been a little bit Green Party focused, and it has been a little bit you know, reactive to things that are happening down here, and that's not good enough. So obviously we do want to, and based on what you members actually tell us is the stuff that you want to focus on, that's kind of what we want to do. So we want to start a programmatic kind of, you know, education series that is specifically about things that are happening both north and south, and we're going to frame those as issues of sacrifice zones. So like, you know, areas of Ireland which, you know, usually in our experience as environmental activists, like the places that tend to get environmentally damaged are places that are also socioeconomically less well off, and it's about tying those two particular concepts together and using Naomi Klein's language of sacrifice zones to kind of discuss that. Does anyone else here want to come in on that question, or do we have?
We do have another speaker if nobody wants to, or a question if nobody wants to speak. So Darren Lovely has an interesting question following on from what you just said. So Darren, do you want to ask that?
Yeah, hi guys. It's quite a practical question. It relates to any provisional timeline that you've mapped out for yourselves, and whether there are any specific milestones that you've already kind of highlighted that you want to address within kind of that time frame.
Do you want me to jump in on that just briefly, and maybe actually Oliver could come in too? I think there have already been milestones that we've hit, including getting the concept to the executive committee and getting recognition as an affiliate group. For me, the next big piece is an AGM that has been discussed, where we put in the actual committee as opposed to the interim committee that we currently have, and then there will be thinking around how to engage at convention. So none of that is particularly dramatic, I don't think, but it's practical and will help us get established. Oliver might have more to add on that, or Lorna.
I'll just turn my camera on first. Yeah, there was two things, two kind of practical upcoming things which I thought would be good. One was John Barry, professor in Queen's, who was just on the call earlier on. He offered to do a series of education programs on green politics, and like I said earlier on, this was actually a really surprising, for me at least, the level of feedback on that in the survey. Like we had, I think there was 20 something comments at the end for kind of general feedback, but there was 60 or 70 ideas for an educational program. So that would be one kind of milestone to start kicking that off. Another thing, like Lorna said, I think quite exciting, an idea of a series on sacrifice zones, and you're thinking about this quite imaginatively. I think we could do. There's been a couple of issues that have come up already. The gold mining on the border, and the border region being a sacrifice zone, I think is a good idea. There was the Shannon water pipeline, drawing water from the Shannon region across the country to Dublin, and thinking of that as being a sacrifice zone issue. Also just Ireland generally, when it comes to data centres, being a sacrifice zone in some ways. So I think those would be two kind of milestones to start kicking off as an organisation. Now they're not milestones possibly in terms you might mean it, Darren, as in achievements, but I think from the viewpoint of this organisation, engaging in outreach, I think that they would be important milestones to kick off and start doing regularly and effectively.
Yeah, I suppose any other kind of timelines are set by what's happening in the various forms of government, both north and south. So there'll be different priorities, and we can cover both jurisdictions, but again we'll need guidance from members as to what things that we have the energy to prioritize, and because it depends in some way, in fact, on member contributions. Like, I'd like to run quite a flat organization. So, you know, if people have suggestions, you know, you're not necessarily even coming to me or Áine for permission. Like, you're kind of just letting us know that you're doing it, and then we're going to be kind of like, okay, you know, now you do it. Like, we're you know, I think what I would like to see anyway is just that people are taking ownership over their activism. And, you know, from I'm sure, Áine, your experience was the same in the north with reproductive justice groups, but like the way that they organize as well, and similar enough to Cllr, like they're extremely flat structures, and it is a case of, you know, if you think that this is something that we should be prioritizing and you're quite happy to take ownership of it, and get a group of members around you to help you with it, then go for it. You know, like we're happy enough with that, as long as it sort of fits within the general principles of like what just transition is. You know, I think that's fair enough. Yeah, and I suppose the timeline then, just down the south, obviously, within the first 100 days, we're supposed to have a climate bill. So I suppose that's something that I would like to work on, and just to have some kind of a very robust response to that if it is not in line with principles of just transition. I think that's something that we could be working on, in which case that's the first 100 days of government. So October 4th will be the deadline for that. Yeah, anyone else? Is there anything coming up in the north, Áine?
Hard to know at this place. So we've had issues in the past while. If anyone has, I mentioned it earlier in terms of our environment minister being clear about not wanting to use the term emergency and things like that. So that has been an issue for us recently. We tried to get a commitment to kind of come forward with a climate act within 100 days, and we were told that was absolutely ludicrous and it wasn't physically possible. So there is a bit of a movement here to try and basically prove him wrong, and come up with something like that. But we don't, in terms of major things in the government, honestly, we've only just had a government for about 6 months now, and they've been focused the entire time on COVID, really, and various other things. You know, if I start talking about Northern Irish politics, sorry, I will probably just start weeping. So I can't think of anything quite as clear as that. We've had a few different things, major changes to the Northern Irish Act that happened in the last couple of weeks in terms of the functions and an executive functions bill. And we're waiting to see how that has played out. It basically meant that, trying to give a synopsis of this rather than boring you with the minutiae detail. Essentially, during the time we had no government, there was a major case taken here called the Bogue case. It centered on a waste incinerator. Basically, the department, without a minister in charge, gave permission for a waste incinerator. And obviously, those against the opposition movement then took a case against that, which basically overturned the decision on the waste incinerator. So that they made a few changes now in terms of the Northern Irish Act to basically say that in terms of planning, it only falls in that minister, and anything that's cross-cutting, so the likes of environmental concerns, only has to go to an executive for looking at if it engages their like statutory obligations. So we've seen, we don't entirely sure how that will play out, but we are quite fearful for it. And in the last few days, our Agriculture and Environment Minister made some changes to the Ammonia regulations, and that basically meant a lot of farm permissions have now, that were held up in the system because of basically the EU regulations basically made some changes that affect what is approved and what isn't approved. So we obviously in a negative way. So that's a big thing for us in terms of basically Brexit and changing to the EU regulations around ammonia and environment. So we're already starting to see moves on that. That waste incinerator will be coming up for decisions soon as well. And then we have the ongoing issues with gold mining, the application of that has gone out to public inquiry. So that will be coming forward. So most of our stuff kind of centers around, this was major kind of planning issues and agricultural issues. But in terms of actual government things, we don't really have we don't have a program for government or anything at the moment. So we're not right sure what is on the horizon there. Sorry, that was probably
no. That's actually
fairly
fairly clear cut. I mean, like it seems fairly clear cut that over time there is going to be just a lot of environmental regulations in particular are going to be, you know, sort of sacrificed because of Brexit. And I would imagine maybe even more so in Northern Ireland perhaps than might be the case, you know, in other parts of the UK. Okay.
I think they're quite good ones, very related. One is from Roisin, and she would like to ask, how will significant differences of opinion be managed within the Just Transition Greens or managing conflict? For example, differences of opinion on how an issue should be communicated. And if Saoirse is there, I'm sorry, I just asked Saoirse if she wants to speak, but Saoirse has a very related question. So Saoirse, if you want to speak to it, otherwise I can ask for you. I'll ask for Saoirse. And the question is, how does that flat system work with things like Twitter? Who decides what is said and when?
Oh, that is a good question. Well, in terms of the conflict one, obviously fight, we take it outside and fight with each other. Yeah, conflict resolution is a very difficult one. Again, we're reaching out to other organizations that have systems that kind of work for them. And it is going to be a learning process. We are going to make mistakes, but I think, you know, I would generally sort of take everyone to be in good faith, and if we can do that, and we have a clear set of guidelines, which I'm hoping to have produced very, very soon, then I think we can actually come up with systems of doing that. And I think it's important not to shy away from complexity either, because you know, systems of how people interact with each other are by their very nature very complex. So that's fine. As regards the Twitter account, Rob volunteered to take on a press role. Rob O'Sullivan was previously the press officer for the Cork Greens, so has a lot of experience in terms of running, I suppose, essentially accounts for organizations. So generally with the Just Transition Greens Twitter account, for example, I mean, it's fairly, you know, like it is run by several of us, and it's sort of done at the moment in a relatively ad hoc kind of way. I would hope again to have those structures, like while flat, still formalized in some sense, particularly when it comes to communication, because that's very important that we're actually quite clear in terms of how we're communicating. Yeah, I think the general principle is, like, you know, please be sound to one another, and take each other as being in good faith, and we can construct sets of rules around that, and we are reaching out to other organizations, because there's a few environmental organizations that are particularly good at it, but also in the spirit of what Sean was saying about reaching out to other and different types of organizations. In my experience, LGBT organizations tend to be extremely good at coming up with guidelines that work in terms of how people interact with each other. I suppose, like, from myself and Anya, like from our experiences in reproductive justice as well, like we've been in organizations that have fairly robust, you know, kind of discussions. And yeah, I suppose generally just we're not taking disagreement as a fight either, because something that kind of emerged over the Programme for Government kind of talks as well is that, like, anyone who said anything that was out of line with, you know, people higher up in the hierarchy suddenly found themselves, you know, on the wrong side of it. And, you know, that's not really what we want. Like, we want to have a space where people can have robust discussions. Neasa has to go at 9. Does anyone else have stuff on those questions? Because they are very good questions.
I just say quickly, being passive doesn't mean you don't have Barneys and, you know, be frank with each other. I think it's important that passivism doesn't turn into passive aggressivism, and actually people talk when they need to and say what they believe, and stand by it then.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I mean, I always see disagreement as something useful. I always learn lots, but I always seek out people who don't agree with me because I feel like that's where you learn the most. Conflict resolution is different from having opposing points of view, you know, because there's a creativity to one and there's a bit of housekeeping to the other. And the housekeeping bit is just rules and regulations and something on a page that people can follow when that happens. But dissent and disagreement is creativity. Now, I do actually have to leave, otherwise I'm going to get divorced. But this was such a brilliant session. And thank you to everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming, Neasa.
Thanks, Neasa.
Thanks, Neasa. See you soon.
Bye.
Thanks, Neasa. Okay, we have two final questions. Is there time for it, Áine and Lorna?
Yeah, we'll do the two final ones, but then what we want to move on to after that is just how to actually get involved, because there's been a lot of talk this evening of member involvement, but we need to tell people how to do that.
Okay, well, they're both related and they both are on that sort of topic. So Peter, Lucy, very good to blur the lines between Green Party, Just Transition Greens and non-party people. How do we reach out? Although Peter is a little skeptical that we will get many non-Green Party people joining. From Mary Gallagher, is there an intention to reach out to organisations such as Friends of the Irish Environment for ideas on how sacrifice zones could complement other potential and further legislative campaigns? And we'll draw a line under questions there.
And I think Mary's idea is a good one. So yes, to answer that question. Anyone have thoughts about involving people not in the Green Party? I mean, we've already got quite a few people. So
yeah, I think it comes back to, like, my sense on that is not necessarily, is, you know, again, we're not some sort of gatekeepers. People, like, this is, I think we're in the midst, like, we can wrap our heads around now the scale of something enormous because of the pandemic, and what's coming is so much worse. And if we start to think in terms of, like, what we belong to and segregate ourselves, then we're lost. Like, we've been before we even get started. So it's not about being gatekeepers. It's about trying to say, like, how do we create space for building all sorts of communities that can work together collaboratively, and, like Lorna said, aren't seeking permission to, like, bottom-up policy making is bottom-up. It's not like through people and any sort of bottom-up organizing should be bottom-up, and people should feel that their agency can be acted on and that they are given an opportunity to be empowered and have the platform that they need to succeed. That should be everything.
Okay, Áine, do you have thoughts on it, or do you want to move to?
I suppose I think it's kind of the thing about other members from other political parties, and that's come up a few times. But, like, for me, you know, it's not the members that declare they're part of another political party that you have to be worried about, to be honest. And I think all movements, you know, it is a movement. I know it came out. This probably came about because of the Programme for Government and because of factions within the Green Party internally, but Just Transition is bigger than the Green Party, and it's a movement. Yes, a part of this will naturally look at the Green Party and Green Party in government, but it's a much wider thing. We're not just here to be a vehicle to critique or approve government actions. It's a much wider thing than that. I think that's the whole education program and all that side of things kind of comes into that, in terms of we are trying to build a proper movement. And I think it's come up quite a bit in the survey in terms of, you know, there's a lot of environmental groups, there's a lot of social justice groups and their various guises, but there's no real movement bringing the two together. And maybe there's a bit of disillusionment. Some of us maybe thought the Green Party was that vehicle, but then I appreciate party politics is not for everybody either. So for me, that's kind of what Just Transition Greens, the benefit it can bring, and it can bring forward all those people that we may differ on in various other issues, but we can all get behind this one movement and push it forward in whatever vehicle, whatever way we need to do that. So it's less important to me in terms of if you're in a political party or you're not in a political party. It's, you know, it's about just transition and how we achieve that as a society.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect, Anya. And you know, I even my own thoughts are a little bit like you know, because lots of people are like, you know, they see it as stay or split, but like a third, I'm not going to say third way, oh God, but a third option is outgrow. Like we can outgrow, you know, the Green Party and the political party structure as well. And it seems as though that's kind of, you know, which is a very, very ambitious target, but you know, I believe in the membership of this organization. I think you're fab. Okay, so how to get involved? Right, Oliver, you might be best placed actually to discuss this particular segment because you've been sort of doing a lot of the thankless organizational work in the background, as has Robin Gafola, by the way. Robin put together our website, which is just amazing work. And Rob O'Sullivan as well has been doing fantastic work, and there's too many people to name, but and possibly some people who mightn't necessarily want to be named at this point, but you know, I'm actually so grateful for the people who've just, you know, rode in so far, and it has just been fantastic. Like I haven't been in an organization like this. Again, like it just makes me think of the reproductive justice kind of movements that I've been a part of. Like it does feel more like a movement than a political organization even. So yeah, Oliver, do you want to just sort of take it away? Like how do people get involved with us?
Sure. So what we have at the minute, we have a website where you can sign up to, and as was kind of shown in the survey, I think the split was roughly 80-20. Most people who've signed up to that want to be official members. Other people are interested in just following us, and I think that's fine too. We've had communication from, say, people who are members of the civil service who would like to engage with us in some way, but maybe they might not be able to be full members for different reasons. So there could be different levels of participation in that way. What we have coming up immediately in front of us is an AGM. We're aiming for September time for that, and a big part of that will be adopting a constitution for the group, and appointing an official committee. And I guess at that time, kind of formal membership will be constituted in some way. So before then, we have a group who are drafting a constitution at the minute. One of them is a barrister. Another person has been involved in writing constitutions like this before, but we will need a group of people to bounce this off, and to get feedback into this ahead of the AGM in September. So it's not just presented as, you know, here's our vision, but we also want to get feedback on that. So that, I imagine, will be run through the emails which you've been receiving over the last week or two. We're also hoping to set up a Slack channel. So advantages with Slack over WhatsApp is that these can be coordinated a bit better. So everybody who is affiliated or a member or whatever you want to call it of the Just Transition Greens can join the Slack group. Then within the Slack group, we can divide into people who are interested in contributing to the subcommittee on the constitution for the group. We can have other people who are interested in the things that were talked about earlier, such as the education series, outreach, and the series on sacrifice zones, and kind of structure ourselves like that. So those are the immediate things ahead of us. And AGM in September, if you are interested, or well, obviously people here who are interested, but if you know other people who are interested, get them to sign up to receive emails on the website, and then expect to receive emails shortly with information about the Slack group and also about how to get involved with the Constitution Subcommittee.
Perfect. There is a suggestion from Kevin just to send this information out in an email. So I think that's a good idea as well. Well, I think then that's it. You know, that's kind of, we've reached the end of the evening. I don't think there's any outstanding kind of questions from the group. I hope people enjoyed the evening anyway, and you know, it's great to have so many people participating as well, and I'm really glad that we had this interaction just to kind of get more of a sense of what the membership wants from this organization and how we go about it, and again, I think we are in a very kind of creative space, which will be a little bit scary, and we will get things wrong, and it may appear to be quite chaotic at times, but I am very encouraged by people's participation so far, and I really do think that we can push the dial a bit, and once we kind of get more different organizations and sectoral interests kind of involved as well, I think we can really just make something that will outgrow, I think, the Green Party. I think that's kind of what we're aiming for here, and we do need to have something that, you know, like something as big and dynamic as the problem that we face, which is climate crisis. So we do need an organization that'll bring everyone along with us, and we can continue to, you know, talk about just transition or get that particular idea out there. Anya, do you want to say anything just to close things off?
Yeah, just like amazed at how many people have showed up on a really nice Friday evening to join in the conversation. I was kind of going, many people get maybe 10, 20 people, so it's really quite encouraging to see so many showing up, and for all the contributions. I'm really, really grateful for everyone contributing. I feel a little bit nearly new to this, and I'm still trying to find my feet with it and seeing what we're going to do and what we're not going to do and how we can move forward. So it's really good to hear from other members in terms of how they maybe see it or the questions they have and how we kind of can shape that going forward. And I just say to everybody to keep talking. As has been said before, we don't intend this to be any sort of top-down sort of movement. We have a committee structure because, well, you kind of do need something there, but realistically, we're not going to be leading the charge on this. It's going to be member-driven, it's grassroots, and just if there's something that you think the group should be doing, or maybe a good idea for us to focus on, or different ways of doing things, just don't be afraid to kind of reach out and, you know, talk to us about doing that, because that's the only way it will kind of grow and develop, and in the way we want it to, is to make sure that we keep having this sort of discussion in whatever format that is. I'm just really excited by it all to see where it can go. Like I said, it's been a rough few weeks for everybody, and I think everyone's had it rough. Probably we've been sheltered a little bit from that up here, so like you know, solidarity to everybody fighting the fight down there as well, and just looking forward to working better with everybody going forward.
And Sean, any last words?
No, not much. It's just heartening to see the response from everyone, and I think we can have fun as well. Like, that's the important bit of life in general. Let's have a bit of crack while we do it, and yeah, then there's very little that can stop us.
Great, Oliver.
I love the idea of having fun. Let's have crack.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, in that case, it is Friday night. Go and have a few scoops, and yeah, we will send out an email to everyone just giving those thoughts, and people want copies of John's speech as well, so we will send that out. And yeah, there's one piece of feedback as well that's just about people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and who needed the video to be on to lip read while people are on, so we'll need to figure something out with that, just in terms of accessibility as well. Okay, cool. Well, thank you all so much, and take care of yourselves and have a good evening. All right, bye bye.